Now we're going to look at population ecology. So the term ecology means is the study of the interactions of organisms um, between each other and their environment. So when we look at organisms typically live in groups. And so anytime you have members of the same species within a group, that is termed a population. If you have multiple populations in the same area, that they would be called a community. And then an ecosystem is the community and its physical environment with both abiotic and biotic components. So here's an organism. This is a fish. When you have a lot of fish of the same type together, that's a population. Here we have community. We have fish, different types of fish, and the living plants. So the ecosystem would be the living and non-living factors that affect all of these living organisms. The growth rate of a population is the number or the per capita rate of increase of a population. So if you have a population that has, say, 1,000 individuals, and you have 30 births per year and 10 deaths per year, then you would figure out the growth rate by taking the 30 minus 10, which gives you 20, divide that by the 1,000 that you already have, and that would give you a 2% increase in the population per year. The biotic potential is the maximum number of, or the maximum population that can grow within a population. So the maximum growth rate that can occur within a population. This will change depending on the environment and how that environment works, or how well that environment will hold these organisms. The exponential growth of a population is seen as a J-shaped curve where you have a lag, a log, and then you have the environmental resistance that will eventually bring that population down. So you can't just continuously increase a population forever. That would be what this is looking like. You have this lag phase, and then you just start replicating really, really fast. Something is going to cause the number of organisms growing to slow down. Typically, you're going to have some either abiotic factor like temperature or the amount of space that these organisms are living in, or oxygen levels, or you might even have the amount of food available for these organisms that will cause the log phase or exponential growth phase to stop. And so anytime you overshoot the carrying capacity is the number of organisms that the population can handle. Once you overshoot that, you're going to have a population crash where the animals or the organisms are going to die out very rapidly. So what we typically see is more of an S-shaped pattern, where you have lag, log, and then you have a deceleration phase, and you hit this equilibrium. And so here we can see that. Here we have again that lag phase where you have organisms introduced into a population. They start growing very rapidly eventually, but then you're going to slow down the growth And at some point, you're going to hit this stable equilibrium where you might increase and decrease, but that's going to be associated with um, the environment and the carrying capacity. The human population has really like boomed in the last 100 years, or actually last, yeah, 120 years, I'll say. Um, we're adding approximately 220,000 people daily to the population, and we're not that many people are not dying every day. So we're actually increasing the population all the time. The doubling time is the length it will take to double the population completely. And right now our doubling time is at 52 years. So we think that our population will level off between 10 and 14 billion individuals at some point. But I mean, we have just increased and increased and increased this population. So there are a lot of reasons why we've increased the population. And if you look here, you can see that the red, the more developed countries, are not increasing near as fast as the lesser developed countries. There's a reason for this. Um, in more developed countries, we have went through the Industrial Revolution. We now have medicine. We have enough food to take care of all the individuals. When you don't have the medicines, when you don't have all the foods, you need more helpers to help in producing foods. You also produce more offspring so that you know that at least one of your children will live on and be able to pass on the genes. So in those lesser developed countries, the developing world, they're still I won't say pre-industrial revolution, but they're still at that area where they don't have the same benefits that we have. They don't have the medical centers every few blocks in their country. They don't have running water all the time, fresh running water that is not going to cause diarrhea, and food that they can just store in a refrigerator. They don't have all of those benefits, those luxuries. When you do, then you don't have to produce as many offspring to make sure that the food is available or that you're going to have at least one child survive to reproduce. And so there's reasons for this. Um, how did we get where we are now? Well, the medical has influenced us a lot. I mean, since we found the first antibiotics in the 1900s, we can treat sickness and people aren't dying as fast. So we've made a lot of bounds, leaps and bounds in the medical field. That's probably one of the most important areas that has allowed us to survive and not have to worry about, our children dying. So now we're going to look at patterns of history or life history. Different organisms have different histories, and so they're going to um, care for their offspring in different mechanisms, and they may produce more or less offspring depending on how much care they give. So, weeds and insects tend to have very little parental care. They mature very rapidly and they produce a lot of offspring, but they don't care for their offspring. Fruit flies are an example. Once they come out of their pupa, they will, within 8 hours, become sexually mature and will start producing hundreds of eggs that they will then lay in whatever medium that they can, and then they leave. And then the next flies, and then those larvae will grow and eventually become flies themselves. Larger organisms give that have long lifespans, they mature later on in life, and they tend to be more willing to give parental care. So this would be mammals, humans are examples. Birds give a lot of parental care. And we have very few offspring because we give the parental care. We have to take care of each organism in our life. There are density dependent and density independent factors that will influence our population size. So density independent factors are going to be things like the weather that influences the size of our population. It doesn't matter if we have a lot of organisms or very few organisms in our population. When a natural disaster hits, it can wipe out hundreds of or even thousands of individuals. Density dependent factors are things like food. So you're going to have competition for food. Disease. Those are things that are going to be influenced by the size of a population. Disease can spread in a larger population. If there's very few individuals in a population, then the disease is more likely or less likely to spread. So let's look at types of species that you'll find in populations. You're going to have native species. These are the ones that always live in your communities. They've been there since the beginning. Invasive species or non-native species are the ones that have migrated or were introduced into a community. So the Asian beetles that everybody sees around that everybody hates because they're like the ladybugs that bite. That's what a lot of people call them. They were introduced. The idea was they were going to take care of some aphids that were causing problems with crops, but they kind of went ballistic, went crazy, and now they're everywhere. That's an invasive species. An indicator species is one that provides an early warning to community problems. One of the best indicator species that we have are the amphibians, so frogs and any type of amphibians, because they live both in water and on land, so they can show problems within water and within land. And then we have those keystone species. Keystone species are the organisms that are going to, and I think here we have good keystone, keep an environment healthy, keep the population or the community healthy. So these elephants are actually very good keystone species. They break down these trees. These trees would otherwise take all the nutrients out of the environment, and this is a grassland area, and so other organisms couldn't survive in that case. I'm going to stop here and I'll upload this video and then I will get the next one started.